Welcome back to another episode of Out Loud Geek, where we discuss news and views about pop culture, science fiction, fantasy, food, cooking, the outdoors, and more. In this box office roundup video for the weekend that ended on November 24th, 2024, 3 new movies made it into this weekend's top 5 movies at the domestic box office. And the domestic cumulative total earnings for this weekend's top 5 movies at the domestic box office rose considerably to $191.9 million, which was a massive 256.24% increase over last weekend's similar cumulative total of $53.9 million. Thus, it was the first weekend in 11 weeks since the domestic top 5's cumulative total earnings were more than $100 million. In other words, it was a very good weekend for movie theaters. But before proceeding, I'd like to ask everyone to please like this video, please leave a comment, please subscribe to support this channel, and please press the bell to receive notifications. Thanks! So this weekend's top 5 movies at the domestic box office included the following. Opening at number 1 was Universal Pictures and Mark Platt Productions' musical fantasy entitled Wicked, starring Cynthia Erivo, Ariana Grande, Jeff Goldblum, and Michelle Yeoh. Opening at number 2 was Paramount Pictures' Scott Free Films, Lucy Fisher's and Douglas Wick's historical drama Gladiator II, starring Paul Mescal, Denzel Washington, and Pedro Pascal. Falling to number 3 was Seven Bucks Productions, Chris Morgan Productions, Detective Agency's Amazon MGM Studios, and MGM Pictures' very high-budgeted Christmas action comedy entitled Red One, starring Dwayne Johnson, Chris Evans, and Lucy Liu. Opening at number 4 was Angel Studios, Tharos Films, BNP Paribas Film Funds, and Crow's Nest's suspense thriller entitled Bonhoeffer, Pastor, Spy, Assassin. And falling to number 5 was Columbia Pictures, Marvel Entertainment's, and several other companies' Marvel threequel entitled Venom: The Last Dance. Wicked opened by earning $114 million domestically and $50.2 million internationally for a global gross opening weekend box office total of $164.2 million. We'll see later in the video what this movie's final domestic and global gross box office earnings might end up being. Gladiator II opened by earning $55.5 million domestically and $165.5 million internationally for a global gross opening weekend box office total of $221 million. And that was $56.8 million more than Wicked's global gross opening weekend box office earnings. And we'll also see later in this video what this movie's final domestic and global gross box office earnings might end up being. Domestically, Red One earned another $13.3 million to bring its current domestic box office total up to $52.9 million. Internationally, the movie earned another $14.2 million to bring its current international box office total up to $64.2 million. So globally, the movie earned another $35 million to bring its current global gross box office total up to $117.1 million. Thus, both Wicked and Gladiator II earned more in their opening weekends than Red One has in 2 weeks. Bonhoeffer, Pastor, Spy, Assassin opened by earning $5.1 million domestically, but no international earnings have yet been reported. Domestically, Venom: The Last Dance earned another $4 million to bring its current domestic box office total up to $133.8 million. Internationally, the movie earned another $14.1 million to bring its current international box office total up to $322.6 million. So globally, the movie earned another $20.4 million to bring its current global gross box office total up to $456.4 million. And as of this weekend, the 3 highest grossing movies, both domestically and worldwide, for 2024 remained Disney Pixar's animated movie Inside Out 2, Disney and Marvel Studios' MCU movie Deadpool and Wolverine, and Illumination Entertainment's animated sequel Despicable Me 4. Domestically, Inside Out 2 ended its theatrical run, so its final domestic box office total remains at $653 million, and it's only one of 2 movies that have broken $600 million domestically in 2024. But internationally, the movie earned another $187,000 to bring its current international box office total up to $1,045.2 million. So the movie's current global gross box office total increased by the same amount to $1,698.2 million, and it remains the first and only movie so far this year to break $1.6 billion worldwide. It also remains the first movie to have broken $1 billion worldwide in 2024, but it's not the only movie to have done so. Further, Inside Out 2 has now earned $252.6 million more than last year's highest grossing movie, Barbie, which earned $1,445.6 million. In terms of estimated break-even points, Inside Out 2 has a reported production budget of $200 million, which, when multiplied by 2.5 and 3.0 respectively, to account for the 50% of gross box office ticket sales that movie theaters keep for themselves, as well as the additional costs of marketing the movie and other miscellaneous costs that the studio pays above and beyond the production budget, yields an estimated break-even point range of $500 million to $600 million. Thus, Inside Out 2 has most definitely made bank. Domestically, Deadpool and Wolverine has ended its theatrical run, so its current domestic box office total remains at $636.7 million, and it remains the second highest grossing movie domestically so far this year, and also only the second movie to break $600 million domestically. Deadpool and Wolverine is also the highest grossing R-rated movie domestically of all time by having surpassed the domestic box office earnings of 2004's The Passion of the Christ during the weekend of August 11th. Internationally, the movie earned another $30,000 to bring its current international box office total up to $701.2 million. So the movie's current global gross box office total rose by the same amount up to $1,337.9 million, which keeps it as only the second movie so far this year to break $1 billion globally. Deadpool and Wolverine is also the highest grossing R-rated movie worldwide of all time by having outperformed the global earnings of 2019's R-rated movie entitled Joker during the weekend of August 18th. In terms of the MCU, Deadpool and Wolverine became the franchise's sixth highest grossing movie worldwide of all time by outperforming the $1,336.5 million that was earned in 2018 by the movie Black Panther. It's also the first MCU movie since 2021's Spider-Man No Way Home to break $1 billion at the global box office. And with its reported production budget of $250 million, when multiplied by 2.5 and 3.0, that yields an estimated break-even point range of $625 million to $750 million. Clearly, Deadpool and Wolverine has already made bank. Despicable Me 4 appears to have ended its theatrical run both domestically and internationally. So its final domestic box office total remains at $361 million, its final international box office total remains at $607.2 million, and its final global gross box office earnings remain at $968.2 million. And it remains only the third movie so far this year to have broken $900 million globally. And for Despicable Me 4, with its reported production budget of $100 million, when multiplied by 2.5 and 3.0, that yields an estimated break-even point range of $250 million to $300 million respectively. Thus, Despicable Me 4 has already made bank. I'm also tracking several other movies that are no longer in or never were in the top 5, which includes the following. Falling to number 8 after being in the top 5 for 8 consecutive weekends was Universal Pictures and DreamWorks Animation's movie entitled The Wild Robot. Domestically, The Wild Robot earned another $2 million to bring its current domestic box office total up to $140.7 million. Internationally, the movie earned another $6 million to bring its current international box office total up to $176.7 million. So globally, the movie earned another $9 million to bring its current global gross box office total up to $317.4 million. Now, to know whether these movies are going to break even or not, as well as how much money they might be losing, we need to estimate their break-even points. When a movie's marketing budget is known, we can add it to the movie's production budget and then multiply the sum by 2. Otherwise, we can multiply the production budget by 2.5 for a single mid-range estimated break-even point, or by both 2.5 and 3.0 for a broader estimated break-even point range. Both methods account for the 50% of gross box office ticket sales that movie theaters keep for themselves. For Wicked, with its reported production budget of around $150 million as reported by Screen Rant, that yields an estimated break-even point range of $375 million to $450 million. For Gladiator II, with its reported very high production budget of $250 million as reported by Variety, that yields an estimated break-even point range of $625 million to $750 million. For Red 1, with its reported very high production budget of $250 million as reported by Variety, that yields an estimated break-even point range of $625 million to $750 million. For Venom: The Last Dance, with its production budget of $120 million, that yields an estimated break-even point range of $300 million to $360 million. For The Wild Robot, with its production budget of $78 million, that yields an estimated break-even point range of $195 million to $234 million. So in this video, I am no longer projecting or never have projected what the final domestic or global gross box office earnings might be for the movies Venom: The Last Dance or The Wild Robot, because their expected future earnings are either currently too small, possibly non-existent, or going unreported, or their projected earnings aren't much higher than their current earnings. And in this case, both of these movies have already made bank. And that now brings us to the movies whose final domestic and global gross box office revenues I am currently projecting, which includes Wicked, Gladiator II, and Red 1. For the movie Wicked, using a range of possible average weekly draws from 30 to 40%, I can project that the final domestic box office earnings for the movie may range from $285 million at the low end, $325.6 million at the mid-range, and $379.4 million at the upper end. Then, using the movie's current domestic share of 69.43%, I can project that the final global gross box office earnings for the movie may range from $410.5 million at the low end, $468.9 million at the mid-range, and $546.4 million at the upper end. So with the movie's estimated break-even point range of $375 million to $450 million, Wicked probably has a very good chance of at least being able to marginally break even. But it's very unlikely to be another runaway hit along the lines of last year's Barbie, as some have speculated. And if the movie is unable to break even, then it currently stands to lose somewhere on the order of $0 to $39.5 million in global gross box office revenue, which, when divided by 2 to account for the 50% of gross box office ticket sales that movie theaters keep for themselves, means that Universal Pictures and Mark Platt Productions currently stand to lose around $0 to $19.8 million. For the movie Gladiator II, using a range of possible average weekly draws from 30 to 40%, I can project that the final domestic box office earnings for the movie may range from $138.7 million at the low end, $158.5 million at the mid-range, and $184.7 million at the upper end. Then, by using the movie's current domestic share of 25.11%, I can project that the final global gross box office earnings for the movie may range from $552.4 million at the low end, $631.2 million at the mid-range, and $735.5 million at the upper end. So with the movie's estimated break-even point range of $625 million to $750 million, Gladiator II currently has a chance of at least being able to marginally break even, but it's by no means guaranteed. If the movie is unable to break even, then it currently stands to lose somewhere on the order of $0 to $197.6 million in global gross box office revenue, which, when divided by 2 to account for the 50% of gross box office ticket sales that movie theaters keep for themselves, means that Paramount Pictures, Scott Free Films, Lucy Fisher, and Douglas Wick currently stand to lose around $0 to $98.8 million. For Red 1, given its very high production budget, I decided to estimate a range of average weekly drops for the movie using statistical calculations based on 9 previous movies that premiered between 2013 and 2022 that starred Dwayne Johnson, in which he had top billing and wasn't part of a broader recurring ensemble cast. That excluded the Fast and Furious franchise movies, but allowed me to include Snitch, G.I. Joe Retaliation, Hercules, San Andreas, Central Intelligence, Baywatch, Jumanji: The Next Level, Jungle Cruise, and Black Adam. These 9 movies have an overall average weekly drop of 32.01% with a standard deviation of 6.64%, from which I can create a range of possible average weekly drops for Red 1 from 25.37% to 38.66%. And using that range, I can project that the final domestic box office earnings for the movie may range from $85.9 million at the low end, $97 million at the mid-range, and $113.5 million at the upper end, which is lower than last week's projection. And that entire projected range now sits between the final domestic box office earnings for 2 of Dwayne Johnson's previous movies, 2014's Hercules and 2021's Jungle Cruise, which earned $72.7 million and $117 million respectively. Then by using the movie's current domestic share of 45.18%, which is higher than last week's, I can project that the final global gross box office earnings for the movie may range from $190.2 million at the low end, $214.7 million at the mid-range, and $251.3 million at the upper end, which is significantly lower than last week's projection. So much so that the current projected range now straddles the final global gross box office earnings for 2021's Jungle Cruise and 2016's Central Intelligence, which earned $210.5 million and $217.2 million, respectively. And given the movie's very high estimated break-even point range of $625 million to $750 million, Red 1 is a massive flop that currently stands to lose somewhere on the order of $373.7 million to $559.8 million in global gross box office revenue, which, when divided by 2 to account for the 50% of gross box office ticket sales that movie theaters keep for themselves, means that 7 Bucks Productions, Chris Morgan Productions, Detective Agency, Amazon MGM Studios, and MGM Pictures currently stand to lose around $186.8 million to $279.9 million. So Red 1 could potentially become the biggest flop for 2024, since its current projected losses are on par with those of this year's current biggest flop, Argyle, whose losses range from $201.9 million to $251.9 million based on my own calculations. So as of this weekend, Red 1 is a definite flop, while Venom: The Last Dance, The Wild Robot, Deadpool and Wolverine, Inside Out 2, and Despicable Me 4 have all made bank, while Wicked and Gladiator II each have a chance of marginally breaking even. Thanks for watching today, and a huge thanks to each and every one of you who has subscribed to support this channel. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, and Blue Sky by clicking on the links in the description. Until next time, this is Out Loud Geek.